I'm George Galloway, and I present كلمة حرة on Al Mayadeen television. Here we are in London. I speak my words freely, either in Parliament, on television, here on the streets of London. كلمة حرة means free word. That's what I speak. So كلمة حرة is a two-way conversation. Check it out on Al Mayadeen television. Welcome to كلمة حرة with me, George Galloway, on Al Mayadeen television, coming to you from London with a studio audience of distinguished experts and one or two enthusiastic amateurs like me. Tonight, we are focusing on the race for the next president of the United States of America, particularly on their foreign policies. We're asking, what difference will it make? Well, if I wanted to cut this television program very, very short, I'd say it's the difference between the devil and the deep blue sea. Let me use as a working assumption that Hillary Clinton is going to be the Democratic Party candidate and Donald Trump is going to be the Republican. Of course, Bernie Sanders is hanging on in there, says he'll go all the way to the Democratic Convention in September, but he's way behind on delegates, and there's the ace card of the super delegates, that is to say the party establishment, who also have votes at the convention in the choosing of the candidate. But I'm going to focus in my remarks tonight on the difference between the two likely candidates. In a way, you could say that the difference between them was paraded in all its ugliness earlier this month at the AIPAC annual convention, the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, which is, of course, the gathering of the clans of supporters of Israel. Most of the supporters in Israel are Christian fundamentalists. Never, ever forget that. Not all Jews are Zionists, and definitely not all Zionists are Jews. But AIPAC is where they gather annually to demonstrate their strength to the American political class, just to let them know who is boss. Well, if there was any doubt that both candidates know who is boss, it was dispelled at this last AIPAC convention, because the contest between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump was who could abase themselves more, who could crawl on their belly more to the pro-Israel lobby between the two of them. And it was a very close contest indeed. Slavishly, they attacked each other for not being pro-Israel enough. It was a Dutch auction in which the bids went ever lower, and the prospects of any American administration emerging from the November presidential election that wants to see even a slight tilt towards even-handedness, never mind towards justice, disappeared the longer the convention went on. Of course, there are differences in nuance on other world affairs. Donald Trump is a bit less hostile to Russia than Hillary Clinton is. Hillary Clinton is a bit less hostile to Iran than Donald Trump is. Hillary Clinton has some kind of diplomatic finesse. She doesn't openly call for a return to torture on the part of the United States government. Donald Trump, on the other hand, responding to the terrorist atrocity in Brussels, said we need to start waterboarding terrorist suspects. He's called for the execution of the families of terrorists. And infamously, he called publicly, and has repeated it many times, that there should be a ban on all Muslims coming into the United States in the current political climate. So Trump is their man, but does that mean that Clinton should be ours? Our woman, of course, not our man, although if you vote for Hillary, you get Bill Clinton as well, 2 for the price of 1. Does that mean that Hillary Clinton deserves our support? I'll argue no. Neither of these 2 candidates will do anything to bring about a fairer world. Both of them will use their overwhelming military power to continue to intervene and exploit various conflicts across the world. So I couldn't vote for either Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton. I appreciate that doesn't leave much, but the best candidate for me has been the Green Party candidate, Dr. Jill Stein. She's actually stood up for progressive foreign policies in a way that none of the other candidates, including Bernie Sanders, have been prepared to do. Well, my audience of experts awaits. My analysis is up for grabs. Kalima hurra means free word, and here every word is free. Who's going to talk first? Who's got the microphone? Yes, sir.
Deniz Sivsi, researcher and Middle East analyst at the Ginkgo Publishing Press. I agree with you about the opinions about the Donald Trump and the Bill Clinton. But more than this, I think there is no differences between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump's approach on the foreign policy. If I specifically focus on the Middle East, both candidates, they have almost the same approach. So at that point, there is no differences between neither Donald Trump or the Clinton. And also more than this, I believe that neither of the leaders or candidates has power to determine the US foreign policy. So also, when we look at the Donald Trump's election campaign, okay, he is quite manipulative. He tried to agitate the peoples, and he actually also quite pragmatic. But we see that he represents most of the Americans' the opinions. And at this point, we have to question, more than Trump, the American public's, the Islam and the foreign policy understanding.
Well, that's undoubtedly true, but we can't vote on that, and we can only rely on the American people that exists, not the one that we would like to exist. I'm not sure that he does speak for the majority of the American public. He might do. We'll find that out in November. But he certainly speaks for a very large number, tens of millions of Americans, whose ignorance is almost as total as their venality, their hatred of Muslims, hatred of Arabs, hatred of the other, their unbelievable belief that the United States was born to rule the world, manifest destiny, American exceptionalism. All these fancy words are all different ways of expressing a belief that America rules the world and should rule the world, and that somebody, probably God, gave them the right to rule the world.
Yeah. Sorry, David. I mean, do you believe that there are really differences between the Donald Trump's and the Clinton's policy, foreign policy?
Not much.
Not much.
You might be able to slip sixpence between them, but not much. She just expresses these ideas more elegantly, with a more diplomatic flourish. She's more, if you like, of the British style, of forked tongue, while Trump looks like he just walked off the set of The Sopranos or Godfather 2, and he acts like a mafia don, because that's essentially what he is.
Yeah, because they do not touch the hot points. No, in the world, the U.S. military forces stationed or based in 147 countries, none of them mention about this.
No, and none of them will change it either. Who's next? Let me take another. Yes, sir, go ahead.
David Otto, counterterrorism expert. I think it's very important for us to understand that we have a choice, as you rightly mentioned, between the devil and the red blood sea. And referring to the devil, we're talking about Donald Trump, who is somebody who...
I'm not sure which one's the devil.
I mean, in a sense, Donald Trump is actually saying what other people in America want to say, but they are not able to say. And Hillary Clinton, who hasn't got a very, very good record in terms of her foreign policy. If you look at the the war in Iraq, especially the intervention in Libya, which has been hanging over our head, actually shows that, there is kind of a recycling of bad leaders in America. So we do not really have a choice, or the Americans do not really have a good choice to choose from, either Trump or
do you agree with me
Hillary.
that this is the worst choice they've ever had?
I mean, I do agree, because looking at both candidates, I can tell you for sure that, these candidates will bring more misery to the American people. They'll bring more misery to other countries in the world than any other previous administration, if they are actually, if both of them or either of them, comes to power. But, we're very, very certain that one of them is going to win the presidency. But what we do not want at the moment is, looking at the current attacks of the terrorism attacks in the world, he's saying that, he's going to ban Muslims, from coming to America, imprison families, he's talked about racial implications of blacks and so on and so forth. This is just going to play into the hands of global jihadism, and this is what people do not want. So people like Donald Trump, coming to power, will bring, more misery to the international community. I don't know about the strength that Israel has, but obviously Israel has a very powerful leg, when it comes to who becomes president in America because of their interest. But what Donald Trump is doing now is he's actually gaining a lot of support from the American population, whether we like it or not. But why is why is he doing that?
More than 1 million people voted for him in a primary in one state in Florida.
Yeah, so it's very important for us to understand that Donald Trump is saying the right things. He's actually saying the things that Americans want to listen to. But the difference is whether when he wins, this is what he's going to do, or he's just saying this for the purpose of a political campaign.
David, that's very helpful, very erudite. Let me take one or two other contributions before I respond. Yes, sir.
Dr. Haider, when we talk about the foreign policy of the United States of America, we have to understand what is the foreign policy first and what it means. Does it really mean the president, or who is going to be the candidate, or what is the theme of the foreign policy? For the American, over the last century, foreign policy, it meant to them is keeping the North Hemisphere is away from troubles. And if you realize that the foreign policy, when the Germans started to get closer during the the First World War, closer to the United States, the policy was completely different. And they followed a policy, something called like a balanced stability, or shifting stability from one place to another in order to move. That's why they were unable to interfere in the First World War in Europe with their allies. But in the Second World War, they were able to do that. So
well,
that's why they shift.
They joined the First World War in the final year.
But I mean, wasn't really. They were the Northern Hemisphere was threatened by the German, so they shifted this kind of stability or this balance from one area to another area. And this is what formulates, the main theme of the foreign policy is keeping the United States or the Northern Hemisphere away from trouble. It doesn't matter whether they make war in Korea, in Vietnam, and anywhere else in the world. They interfere in Europe. This is not. This is like a precaution. This is a preventive step. They do it so in order not to get in trouble. Anyway, the president himself is the theme or the focus of power. And what can really this president do? I mean, there are certain powerful, let's say, factors in the United States internally, like the Congress, like the High Court, like the federal, the central bank, and the mood of the American people. Yeah, these are the factors can control the power of the president. Although he has more power in the foreign policy, because he can take a decision, but not a powerful decision, but he can play with it. If I move, for example, to the recent days, we take it from, for example, after Iran had this revolution, Carter has shifted this type of policy. He wanted to play a different policy. This policy is shifted, is making those local powers take care of themselves. But Carter it didn't work because it was the end of his period of time when Reagan came, and then the Iranians tried to play the game with him at the same time. They gave the American hostages not to Carter. They gave it to Reagan. So this type of policy has been followed by Obama. While who governed the foreign policy with George W. Bush, it wasn't himself. It was something like contingencies, or something happened in this world, like September 11. So he didn't have a foreign policy, a proper foreign policy at that time. So September 11 governed the foreign policy for George W. Bush, and what he did is he started to move this kind of balance of stability from one place to another. So he did the war in Afghanistan, then he moved to Iraq. So he destabilized all these areas to formulate his foreign policy. While Obama, he followed completely a different system, and it wasn't really easy for him. So Obama, he tried to make every local player formulate his policy. And that's why he designated the power for those people to solve their problems. That's why from his doctrine, if you look at this doctrine, one of the main reasons, or one of the main point he made, he said for the Saudi Arabia, listen, you're not the only people here. You have to share this power with the Iranian. So this kind of policy is really the theme of a new policy for the American. And I don't think, whether Trump or Clinton or whoever is coming is the person who formulates this policy. They can, at the moment what they are playing is to grab as much as they can of people to vote for them, but later then it might be a period of, for example, of issues in order to formulate their foreign policy. And I don't think it's easy as before, because the Americans are not interfering, especially in the Middle East, in any war like before.
Well, America is a power in decline. Of that there is no doubt. Mao Zedong said 50 years prematurely that America was a paper tiger. It wasn't then, it isn't a paper tiger now, but it's certainly an old and declining tiger, and no longer has the wherewithal, the power, the strength to intervene in the way that they would have done in the past. But I never like to accept the argument that the president isn't really in charge of foreign policy. I mean, just in the last 12 months, we've seen how a president can do things which almost everybody else in America doesn't want to do. President Obama just went to Cuba. He just reopened the American embassy in Cuba and the Cuban embassy in Washington. He just visited Raul Castro and stood smiling in Revolution Square with Che Guevara's figure on the wall behind him. Nobody else in the United States wants that. The Congress doesn't want it. The Supreme Court almost certainly wouldn't want it. The American media didn't want it. But Obama did it because he wants something by which people can remember him.
But it means he redefined
yes,
the way the foreign policy is formulated.
You can't say the president doesn't have the power, but at the same time he reformulated a major aspect of foreign policy. And in the same 12 months, nobody wanted to make a deal with Iran. The Congress didn't want it, the Senate didn't want it, the Supreme Court didn't want it, the media didn't want it, the political class didn't want it, but Obama wanted it, and he did it. Yes, Madam.
Dr. Hala Diab, a journalist, author, writer, analyst at Jamestown Foundation, militant, leadership monitor. I would disagree in a way that I think that the President of the United States is the kind of the face of the foreign policy and manifestation of this foreign policy. Obama was at that time, at that age, when he was elected as a president, United States wanted a man like Obama, and that, in a way, was a kind of ticket of America to renew its trust in relationship with Middle East and foreign policy. And we have seen that, actually, when Obama went to Egypt and he had that famous speech in Al-Azhar. And then that changed drastically, when they went and they bombed Libya, and then they want to bomb Syria, and they get involved in what's happening in Yemen, blinding their eye to the atrocities that's happened in Yemen. And that was actually till the rise of ISIS in the heart of Syria. And Trump himself today is the product of the rise of ISIS in the heart of Syria, where we find that extremism has produced a far right like Trump, where he today says British Muslims are, kind of not reporting terrorism or extremism. And I see that now we are actually in a very difficult situation, because we are either have to end up with someone like Trump, or we end up with Hillary Clinton. I mean, from my perspective, I think that reading the book of Hillary Clinton, The Hard Choice, and seeing, her own history in the Middle East, she has more knowledge of the Middle East. She has been in Syria, in Iraq, in Iran, in Russia, while Trump is an ignorant man. He is like George Bush. He's a kind of a silly, stupid person who has no knowledge of Middle East, no knowledge of Muslims. And I think that what could, lead to more atrocities in the Middle East. And I think we need to look at the foreign policy in relation to what the new presidents in the United States going to give or solve the situation in Syria, the situation in Libya, the situation in Yemen, the situation in Iraq, the problematic relationship between Saudi Arabia and Iran, the atrocities that happen in Yemen. So I think that is the question that we have.
And that is the question to which we shall turn right after this. You're watching كلمة with me, George Galloway, on Al Mayadeen Television, coming to you from London, but discussing the United States, because whoever is the next president of the United States is going to be, of course, a powerful player on the international stage. The question is whether it will be Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump, and what it will mean for all of us, whoever it is. Maybe they both could lose, as Henry Kissinger once famously opined about a war in the Middle East. But alas, they both can't lose. One of them is going to win. Now, just before the break, a number of very powerful points were made, and I suppose the nuance that was introduced was whether it's better to have the devil we know or the devil we don't know. Well, we've all got a view on that. Let's see what happened when we took the كلمة camera on to the streets of London. Watch this.
From the debates that have been, going on from both the Democrats and the Republicans, do you think we've got a clear idea about their, foreign policy issues from both debates?
I think they're spending too much time arguing with each other and trying to bring out the negative aspects of each other's campaigns rather than focusing on important issues.
I think the US is going through an interesting time at the moment, and they're not really talking about the things that matter. I think when you look at the Democratic debates, sometimes they're actually talking about policy and there's some substance there, but frequently the media are trying to pull it towards the Republican circus that's going on. I think it's important that, the Democrats present a strong candidate who's really going to talk about the things that matter to the world.
Do you think we've got a good idea of their foreign policy issues?
There's been a lot of kind of infighting. It's very much like, is it going to be Hillary? Is it going to be Donald? Trump doesn't give me many answers. I'm not really sure,
When you look at them, they're just bickering. They're not talking about anything concrete. And foreign policy is basically limited to China and let's destroy ISIS.
We've got a good idea about some of the candidates' stance on what's going on in Yemen, for instance, Saudi Arabia's war on Yemen, about the Middle East, about Israel and Palestine. Do you think we've got enough facts about what their policies would be on these issues?
I don't, and I think that the media focuses more on the inflammatory aspects of the debate rather than the important foreign policy or economic aspects.
I think Trump might kind of have a general attitude that he's not going to really have an open dialogue. It's kind of worrying. It's a very closed-minded approach.
Well, there's the one set of views from the streets of London. We want to hear from the audience, but let me just make one final point before throwing back to the audience. Hillary Clinton is more predictable, but she's predictably very, very bad. Not just because of her abasement before the Israel lobby that I referred to earlier, but her absolute culpability in the destruction of Libya and all that that has meant, her support for the war in Iraq, which Trump, by the way, opposed, her attitude to the power of the United States can be summed up in her laughing. She laughed about Libya and the demise of Gaddafi. She said, "We came, we conquered, he died. Ha, ha, ha." Well, unfortunately, a lot of other people had to die too, and many, many more are dying around the world. So, given my position is that the world should not be led by the United States of America. You could argue that it's better if Trump wins, because nobody in the world will want to be led by Donald Trump. How's that for a controversial point of view? Doctor?
I want to add 2 points to what the lady said. If we take George W. Bush period, what formulated his foreign policy? First, they started to say, we are fighting terrorism, and he didn't formulate this policy. September 11 imposed itself to become a foreign policy for the president because there was no terrorism before. After that, he took the democracy issue to the Arab world, and he pretended that he wanted to introduce democracy. And the first failed. He couldn't finish the war in Afghanistan. More Al-Qaeda are spread all over. More Wahhabism are supported by his allies, the Saudi Arabia, and nobody could control them. And America lost the war against those jihadis and the sleeping cells here and there. In the democracy as well, they failed. In Palestine, the roadmap for Palestine and for the Palestinian to bring peace to them, more territories has been occupied by the Israelis, more Palestinians died, and more fundamentals we can see or aggressive attitudes toward the United States because they did not meet, their policy. So all of this has failed, but they were not formulated before when George W. Bush, he didn't say, my foreign policy is going to be this and this and that. So at the moment, we might see Clinton saying, because she has experience, I am going to do this and that, but when it comes to power, she may change completely, and another situation can impose itself to adapt a different policy.
Please, let's hear from a Palestinian. But just before you speak, I want to, sorry to disagree with you again, the project for a new American century, which the neocons had already cooked, predated the election of George W. Bush. The hawks on the Potomac had a foreign policy. George Bush, probably too stupid to understand it and probably didn't read it. But his team of Wolfowitz and Rumsfeld and Cheney above all, they had a foreign policy, all right. It didn't need 9/11 for them to develop a foreign policy. Madam.
My name is Fatima. I'm a Palestinian origin and I'm a filmmaker. The foreign policy and the election in the state, I don't think it is really that effective in the election, in the U.S. election, unless it hits the candidates, first of all. So I think what's happening at the moment between Hillary Clinton and Trump, the campaigns are running, is not that much difference. But if you want to take a side as a political side, you have to take one side at the end of the day. And from my observation, from the two candidates which now they are actually behave, I don't think actually Trump is the best candidate as a Palestinian, because he's very, very vague and naive about the Palestinian issue. However, in compared with the Hillary Clinton, I think she's much understandable for the situation. although she's not doing anything for the Palestinians, but in compare, she knows what's happening in the ground more than him. She's more actually understandable for the Palestinian situation because she's been many times to Palestine. She's been, with her husband, Clinton, during the peace process, Oslo agreement. So I'm not taking any side actually, but I'm just saying in compare, at the end of the day, we have to be actually in one side politically.
Well, it's not,
whether
all,
if we agree or not, actually, with this
why
candidate.
Why is it necessarily a better thing that she knows more about the Middle East?
Well,
because we know a lot about her, and it's all bad.
Well, you've said it actually. Whether to be the devil or the bad devil, it's just like that, So you have to be, taken aside. I agree with this, with what you've said, and from what I've heard from Donald Trump, actually yesterday, just after the attack in Brussels, he was really nasty when he. I've just taken this from The Guardian when he said about the Muslim in the U.S. what they should do. And he's saying it is like they're protecting each other, but they are really doing very bad damage, and they have to open to their society. They have to report the Bedouin. That's what he reported. He said they have to report the Bedouin, and if you report the Bedouin, all of the sudden you're not gonna have is the kind of problem. So there is something going on, and I would say this to the Muslim in the United States also, when they see trouble, that they have to report it. They are not reporting it, and they're absolutely not reporting it, and it's and that's a big problem. So he's saying these words about the Muslim community and the Bedouin community, and
no
for me
that.
as a Palestinian, as an Arab, as a Muslim in Western country like Britain, it concerned me. Where are we going? Where are we going? And it raised the issue of our community, as a Muslim community or as an Arab, you name them. Where are we going, and where we have to stand? Where we have to, to be more? Do we have to be more integrated to the society, and do we have to be more aware of what's happening with the U.S. and with the U.S. policy? So this is what my concern, and we have actually to, to take this in account.
Okay, Doctor.
I think what we have to do, I think we have to look back to Middle East, to the Arab and Muslim countries, and see how they are divided, how they are, there is sectarian division, hatred. This extremism didn't really landed from heaven and just landed in the heart of Syria. Extremism that we are seeing, and this ISIS chopping heads, this is because of the lack of social reform, this kind of some of the clerics, I'm not saying all the clerics, some of the clerics who were hate preachers, and also because of people think that revolution is the key, that we want Western democracy, while it's about evolution. It's about starting from the grassroots. I mean, look at Syria, look at Libya, look at Egypt, look at Iraq. These countries, they went through a long history with colonization and then long history of military coups. And the moment they were settled as countries, instead of building these countries into a state, and each country in Arab countries or any country in the world, we have problems. But that doesn't mean we go and destroy the state. That doesn't mean we kill each other. That doesn't mean we burn and we destroy our infrastructure and we become so hated into each other. I think before we're asking, oh, what actually is Hillary Clinton going to do, and Trump, why Trump is speaking that about Muslims, let us look at the acts of some Muslims. Look at some Muslim countries which is supporting terrorism, which sending arms to the so-called democratic moderate rebels
but
with,
the Americans are not disagreeing with that.
Yeah.
The Americans are completely agreeing with what's happening.
Okay, there's a lot of people want to speak.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people want to speak. Doctor first and then you.
I think it's very important for us to understand that the idea that George Bush created foreign policy out of 9/11 is false, because America already had a list of countries, that they were talking about regime change. 9/11 was just a simple excuse that it was given to the people to say, yeah, this is the reason why we're going to attack Afghanistan and Iraq. So we have to understand that point. And we also have to understand that, in terms of looking at the point in question, which is, which of the candidates would be preferable, Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton in terms of foreign policy, Donald Trump does not have an idea or a clue outside America. Hillary Clinton understands, the dynamics of things that are happening in the Middle East. She understands in Europe. But at the same time, the errors that she's made, even if she's given time to repeat herself, and go through it, she's not going to make any difference. So I think, what we are faced with is two candidates. Hillary Clinton would, the status quo will remain the same. The world will still be unsafe under Hillary Clinton. With Donald Trump, it will become worse.
So
I will talk about the two things. The first lady about the Muslim countries and about the choose Donald Trump's and the Hillary Clinton. Okay, I do not prefer the Donald Trump, but you may say Hillary Clinton is better. Or at least he knows more about the Middle East. Yeah, he knows more, but he knows more terrible things. He knows more how to fight. He knows more how to intervene. He knows more how to kill. He knows more how to support Islamist groups. He knows more how to intervene in Libya. He knows more how to divide some countries. That is why he's worse than the Donald Trump. At least Donald Trump, he is just a pragmatist guy. He just make a show, so he doesn't know the politics. That is why Hillary sometimes worse than the Donald Trumps, because he knows how to play with the wars. Now come to the Muslim countries. As the lady says, last year I did a fieldwork in Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Turkey, and Iran about the ideological conflict between the Muslim countries and how the Muslim countries at the grassroots level turn into the conflict. I also met with the Jabhat al-Nusra members, ISIS members, Shia military forces, Kurdish forces. When we take issue in the Middle East, okay, just put aside the Western countries, Middle Eastern countries, the Muslim countries, they have to look at themselves, but at the ideological level. I do not want to tell them or tell our audiences, we have to criticize Islam. But we have to make something sure that how do we interpret Islam? When we look ISIS, I read almost all of their sources. My book is going to publish about ISIS soon. What ISIS do, they make reference to Quran, they make reference to Salah period, they make reference to Ibn Wahab, they make reference to Ibn Taymiyyah. When I look ISIS reference, when I look these sources, ISIS is true. I'm checking sources. So the question is, which kind of the interpretation of the Islam we have to follow? Which kind of the Islam the scholars have to show the people that is the real Islam? So that is the main question the Muslim people have to deal with that.
Well, it is a question, but it's not the question
that's my comment.
It's not the question we're discussing tonight.
No, I'm just
in fact,
a lady is talking, so she says the Muslim countries.
Yes, not yet,
no,
because
finish,
I've got to take a break. You're watching كلمة with me, George Galloway, on Al Mayadeen Television, coming to you from London, but discussing the United States. The President of the United States, specifically the next President of the United States. Which would be better, or maybe which would be worse, Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump? Let's hear from the gentleman at the back. Go ahead, sir.
Hi there, my name is Hassan Al-Khatib. I'm a journalist and documentary filmmaker. I personally think that Donald Trump will probably not be elected as the President of the United States come November time. But if he does, how bad will he really be? I mean, I think, in my own opinion, most of the stuff he says is a lot of hot air. I think he's just trying to attract a larger number of voters. But when he does come into power, it's going to be quite difficult for him to implement some of the things he's been talking about. And some of the things he's been talking about is just, so dangerous, and it's going to make, America even... there'll be a lot of people who'll be hostile towards America. So it just for me, it doesn't make any sense that he's going to be implementing the stuff that he's talking about right now. What do you think? Do you think?
No, I agree with you. I don't think that he will. I think it is a lot of hot air, but it has a purpose. And I disagree with you about the likely outcome in the election. I would argue that Donald Trump is the only Republican who could possibly beat Hillary Clinton. Why do I say that? Because he will monster her. between his nomination and election day, there is no pot that he will not stir, no barrel that he will not scrape, no scandal that he will not endlessly exploit. He will obey no normal rules of decorum of any kind. He will absolutely assail her as a monster, like King Kong. It'll be like King Kong climbing up the Empire State Building. It might not work, but it's the only way that the Republicans can possibly defeat Hillary Clinton.
Didn't McCain do that to Obama in 2008? I mean, he's tried to, say, like, oh, he's a Muslim, he supports terrorism, all that kind of stuff. They really, pushed a lot of lies against him.
But he didn't do it as well as Trump, and Obama was a much, much better candidate than Hillary Clinton. Obama was fresh, never held power before, never committed any crimes before, never made any spectacular blunders before. Hillary Clinton isn't Barack Obama. She has baggage that Obama never had, and he will ruthlessly exploit that baggage. And secondly, McCain didn't get the turnout in the election up. For someone like Trump to win, you've got to get the turnout up from 50% to 60%. And who are the 10% that didn't vote last time or any time? They are the lowest, the most base, the poorest, the most ignorant, the most prejudiced, the most bigoted, who are out of the political system. Trump can energize that kind of people. Now, from my point of view, and this I say to the Arabs and to the Europeans and to the British, it's not our business who's the President of the United States, and it's not the United States' business what we do. We should be saying, you can have your president, have whatever president you like, but don't think you rule us. Don't think you're going to tell us what to do. Now, from that standpoint, President Trump is better for me, because I'll be able to say to the European people, are you serious? You're taking orders from this monster, this ignoramus? Nothing would discredit American power more than Trump winning. And as I want to discredit American power, I'm kind of leaning towards Trump, as is becoming increasingly obvious in this discussion. Gentleman in the middle row.
My name is Ali. I am a journalist. I have a question about the nuclear deal. Trump told if I am going to president, I will ignore the nuclear deal. My question is, if he does it, other countries follow him, and if they follow him, what happens forward? And my other question is, Trump and Clinton for Iran both same, because both support Israel, both support Saudi Arabia, both want more sanctions for Iran. What's kind of different for Iranian people?
Okay, well, I think Trump supports Saudi Arabia less than Hillary Clinton does. I also think, actually, he supports Israel less than Hillary Clinton does. But the difference might be marginal. Trump says he'll scrap the nuclear deal. I don't think he will. But if he does, the Europeans are much less likely to follow him than they would be to follow President Clinton, for the reasons I have been adumbrating all this evening. The reality is the United States can call off the Iran deal, but that doesn't mean everybody else has got to follow them. And if it's Trump that's doing it, they're less likely to follow them. That's my view on that. Yes, the lady next to you in the middle.
Just back to the Palestinian issue again. We have seen Trump actually very radical in his campaign running for election, while again Clinton is less actually radical than him. The question about Palestine issue, Trump is really very aggressive and very, not supported to the Palestinians, while, as you've said, he is supporting to Israel. And this is raising the issue that if you are agreeing that if you are supporting Trump to be as a candidate, not supporting.
I'm not supporting Trump.
If you are saying Trump, you can get actually the community, the public to say, look, this is a stupid man. He's going to do this bad thing to the issue of Palestine or the Middle East. Then where are we going actually after that? It's better for us actually to see somebody more understandable for the issue of Palestine and the Middle East.
I'm not understanding what you mean by understandable.
No, I mean
you mean understanding?
No, understanding the issue more, understanding the issue, because we, as a Palestinian, we are paying the big price in the Middle East at the moment, especially with the whole Arab countries who are now, divided and fighting each other, forgetting the Palestinian issue in one case. The other issue, the other issue is the Palestinians are now fighting against occupation. Nobody is listening, is like even watching what's happening on the ground. The settlements are just seizing and taking the land. The settlements are killing and firebomb the Palestinians in their houses. Where are we going? I would say,
if you let me answer, I will.
I would say if any one of these candidates are going to support the Palestinians and give them a protection, that's what the Palestinians now in the West Bank need.
But neither of them, and I have to stop you there, neither of them are going to support the Palestinians. No American president has ever supported the Palestinians. And the problem in the past has not been that the president didn't understand the Palestinians enough. President Obama is a professor. I have walked and talked with him before he became a presidential candidate. He told me all about Professor Edward Said and Raja Khalidi and all the other academics who taught him everything. He knows everything about Palestine. The problem's not a lack of understanding. The problem is they support Israel. So choosing someone because they understand the Palestinian issue more than someone else is foolish, because however much they understand it, their policy is going to be exactly the same. Now, it's my interpretation that if we're looking for nuance, Trump is slightly less slavish in his support for Israel than Clinton, but only slightly. And the lobby is powerful, whoever is the president. But I'd rather take a chance on the devil I don't know, because I already know that the devil, Clinton, is a devil. I don't know if Trump will govern as a devil. He may well, might well, probably will. But I don't know. At least I know Clinton is the devil. She is the devil. He might be the deep blue sea, but she's the devil. That's my point of view. Doctor.
The difference between politics and diplomacy within the American foreign policy in the Middle East, definitely has nothing to do with diplomacy. And going back to the Palestinian cause, it's more of the work of diplomacy than only politics. But I think if you look at the presidential candidates' programs or what they're going to do, it's more about internal changes, health services, the situation of women in the States, and the gun situation in the United States, but there are not a lot on the agenda of both presidents about foreign policy, because it's always like that, where we will be surprised with what is next for America. I mean, reading through what is happening at the moment, what's happening in Syria, the rise, the ideological rise of ISIS, Trump might be the new face of what America wants to be. I mean, in his relationship to the foreign policy, his relationship to Middle East, and his relationship to immigration situation, especially with, the migrant crisis. So there is a big possibility that Trump is the manifestation of what America wants its foreign policy to be in the future.
No, I think that Trump is accidental. I think the American establishment never wanted Donald Trump and doesn't want Donald Trump now. In fact, I'm absolutely certain about that. This is not some conspiracy somewhere. that somebody said, let's bring Donald Trump. This is something they never expected. But it is, as you yourself said earlier, a product of the catastrophic situation that exists on the world level. The only thing Americans know about foreign policy is that they hate and fear Muslims. So which of these two candidates is going to protect them from the Muslims? Well, he's open and honest, as a mafia top don is open and honest. He tells you what he's going to do. She's a liar who's going to do the same things but expresses it in a more diplomatic language. That's the only difference. The big question is, for us, why do we allow American presidents, whoever they are, to tell us what to do? If the Arabs would unite, 350 million of them, they could tell the American president to go and get stuffed, get out of our affairs, keep your nose out of our lives.
Right.
Yes, Doctor.
George, if I mention maybe some point, I might, from this point, take the discussion into a different dimension.
Go ahead.
What are the points or the major factors might affect or be part of the foreign policy of the United States in the future? I think, one of the fixed points, which is unchangeable, is Israel. Clinton mentioned yesterday how much we are raising, or she's heating up the race toward Israel, how much she is very sympathetic, to Israel, how much she loves Israel, how much security we have to provide to Israel. She's trying to, bring some emotional level to the debate, Israel and its security. And this is the major point for the Arabs to think about, which really affect the Palestinian and might affect the situation in Syria and what's happening in the region. Anyway, security in Europe, after this terrorist attack, it might be a big excuse for the American to concentrate on security in Europe and a part of its foreign policy. Russia, what is the role of the new Tsar of Russia? Putin is not a soft person anymore. He has muscles, he can stretch his muscles, and he can hit as well. The Americans tried to finish the Syrian regime like they finished other regimes, but they failed. So there are more constraints for the foreign policy to be applied or adapted in the Middle East. Iran was a good point for the American, mainly Obama, but the Iranians succeeded and finished the nuclear file peacefully the way they like. But this might affect a Trump agenda, because he is promising that he will rip off all this treaty the moment he gets, and that is this is a very aggressive policy, and it may trigger war again in the Middle East and bring us back God knows how long. Security in North Korea or in Southeast Asia or all this area. This is a very important file for the American, and that's why I think they shifted their policy or their main concentration from the Middle East and I would say subcontract the problem solving for the major powers and mainly the Russians to solve these problems between Iran, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Yemen, etc. Although the Americans, they support them fully, and they know who is financing all these terrorists. They know that, and they are keeping quiet. But I think these are the major points which might affect the formulation of the new foreign policy for the new president.
We'll be right back. You're watching كلمة with me, George Galloway, for Al Mayadeen Television here in London. Final segment. Who's best or who's worst? Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump? We'll hear finally from the audience in a minute, but we took the Al Mayadeen كلمة camera onto the streets of London. Watch this.
Do you think the next president, whoever they will be, are going to be pretty much the same as the previous presidents in terms of their own foreign policy, or do you think there may be a change with a particular candidate?
I think whoever's the next American president is going to be regressive from where Obama is. I don't think he's done enough in relation to the Middle East and to other countries.
Oh, there definitely will be a change. I think so, depending on whoever it is.
We don't know what's going to happen, and we don't know what's going to happen in the Middle East. We don't know who's going to get in. Clinton almost probably definitely won't change it. Clinton won't try and mess up all the work she's done. But Trump will try. Trump will probably fail because he won't be allowed by Congress because Congress aren't a bunch of idiots.
We're going to try and change it up, probably, because the popular opinion in the US isn't really with the current president.
If you were a person living in the Middle East, would you be quite worried about what you've been hearing?
Everybody should be concerned. Everybody, everywhere.
I think everyone is, to be honest with you.
No, I'd be terrified. I don't know if I would want to go either visit or live in the US, to be honest, with some of the remarks that have been said by some of the Republican candidates.
You'd have to ask the person in the Middle East, I'm not sure.
I hope that people around the world are worried about it, because if a Republican president becomes empowered, they'd be more willing to use more force, but they'd be more willing to make more ignorant decisions about the Middle East.
Yeah, majorly. Well, I'm half Iranian, so I can't really go to America now if I don't know if I want to, if I have to go through that visa process and stuff. They're shutting the doors to a lot of people, and yeah, I guess my family are pretty concerned, out there right now.
Well, I agreed with the first guy. Whoever it is, it's going to be worse than Obama. Obama has been a massive disappointment. He has committed terrible acts, crimes, from drones to the destruction of Libya, the betrayal of the Palestinians and the betrayal of his message in Al-Azhar. These are all very, very bad things. But if the other guy had got in, they would have been worse. There certainly would not have been the rapprochement with Iran. And there would almost certainly have been a different US posture towards Syria, which has been pretty bad as it is. But if John McCain had been the president, I think that the outcome in Syria might well have been very different. And if Russia had taken the same stand that it has now taken, that might have, just might, have provoked a world war. It's as serious as that. So, last round of the guns. Yes, sir.
Who is the worst or the best? Both are the worst, because US foreign policy is worst. And we have to criticize, we have to talk about the structure of the US foreign policy, not about the actors. When we look, I did my PhD in international relations and I work on the US foreign policy. When we check the US foreign policy on the 20th century, we see that after the Second World War, from the Marshall, Carter, Reagan, Bush, his son, and even to Obama, they have the same doctrine. Almost the same doctrine, because the foreign policy is based on a structure, is based on an ideology, is based on, and through the US case, realism and no conservatism. Obama or Hillary or another ones, they're just actors how to implement this foreign policy. They do not have power to change it. So neither, and that doesn't matter, Trump will come or Hillary will come, they will just play how to implement this foreign policy. They do not have power to change. And just add something, we're talking about the Palestinian issue. Just look at the Kurdish issue. Just look at the Kurdish issue. Which of the, look at US history, when we see that all of the US presidents, they play with the Kurdish issue in Iraq, in Turkey, in Syria, and in Iran. They play with the Kurds. None of them really provided the Kurds any rights. And these people, they suffered almost for 1 century, and still. So the policy is the same.
Well, it isn't the same. Or Obama wouldn't have been in Havana normalizing relations with Cuba.
But what happened after that?
The nuclear deal with Iran would not have been signed. So it isn't the same. Dr. David.
Yeah, but after Cuba, he went to Argentina and talked with the dictators. Yeah, after the Cuba, nothing is changed.
There's no
after
dictators
the Cuba,
in Argentina.
No, the mothers are on the street and they say without, because when the dictatorship, they killed these mothers' sons, US support, and Obama tell nothing about this.
Well, Obama was a boy when the dictatorship were killing these children. Dr. David.
I just want to say that, you know, the American foreign policy, we should move away a little bit from the Middle East and then talk about Africa, because Africa is a very, very strategic continent for the current administration, which actually invited about 50 African states in America to talk about especially considering the role of China in Africa at the moment. So what I'm thinking now, you know, looking at between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump might be a necessary evil for Africa, because, you know, what he would bring is, you know, he might not give the kind of finesse that Hillary Clinton would bring, you know, in terms of, you know, looking at those natural resources which America is going to Africa, you know, to exploit, you know, looking at their military bases that they've built in most countries in Africa, talking about Djibouti, you know, they've built in Niger State, in Niger Republic. So I believe that in terms of their foreign policy, you know, I'm talking about Donald Trump, in Africa, it would be a blessing for the African governments, because it will give them an opportunity to actually look at their national interest, you know, and then abandon this Americanization and all this neocolonialism that America will bring. So it is a good thing for me and for Africans if Donald Trump actually wins, because then it would alienate African governments from America and then give them an opportunity to be actually independent.
It's about time that the Africans and the Asians and the Arabs and the Europeans told the United States to mind their own business, to attend to their own problems, which are manifold. David, thanks very much. Doctor?
I want just to say that because Trump said that if he comes to power, he wants to send troops and soldiers on the ground, boots on the ground in Syria. And that is worrying. And that's why it comes back to the thing we have said, that Arab countries and Muslim countries, they have to strengthen their allies in the region with other countries, whether it's Iran and Russia and Europe, and really should have kind of the diplomatic relationship in the Middle East, and also the Arabs and the Muslims should work more in the diplomatic relationship in order to kind of stop this kind of intervention of America in Arab countries and in Muslim countries.
I agree. Doctor?
Final point. I think if Clinton is to win this election, I think this Obama doctrine will continue. If Trump to win, it means there will be more war, and we will go back to George W. Bush methodology, and there will be really disasters in our country, mainly with the Gulf states who support terrorism, and that's very obvious.
Well, I don't know if it's very obvious, but it is very possible. You may very well be right. But my take on Trump is that he hates Saudi Arabia. He really hates them. And he wants to deal with the font of extremism and fanaticism which is coming out of, pouring out of Saudi Arabia. And paradoxically, his Islamophobia accentuates that feeling. So if you're looking at who of the two would be more of a slave to the princes in the Gulf, I would say it's Hillary. Last word to you, Madame.
Yeah, I want to say that, you know, like the Americans are not looking at what's happening in the Middle East as if they are very taken into their internal policies and not looking what America did to the Middle East. Like Clinton, she said that they made Al-Qaeda. So why they are supporting Trump and saying Muslims are terrorists when they know, if they look on the media, they would know that they
never
created
appeared
them.
on the media. You see, there's the problem.
No, Clinton, they show it on YouTube.
Yeah, might have been on YouTube, but most Americans don't know what you're talking about.
Yes,
So
why are they
Saudi
ignorant?
Arabia is. They think Britain is in the Middle East. They couldn't identify Djibouti if their lives depended upon it.
And yet they are ruling the world.
Yes, well, this is because we are the world, Rania, because we allow them to rule the world. As I've said on this show 100 times.
And we give them our money as well.
Yes,
this is the trouble.
If the Arabs from the Atlantic to the Gulf said, actually, we're big enough, historic enough, you know, we were inventing mathematics before you even arrived in North America. And when the British were painting their faces blue and living in the forest, we were dealing with science and mathematics, algebra, and so on. It's because people allow them to rule the world, that they rule it. You know the old saying of the emperor has no clothes. All that's required is somebody to say and act on that say. That actually, you might think you're the emperor, but you have no clothes. And you have nothing to say to us. You have done enough to us. We don't want you anymore. We don't want France. We don't want Britain. We don't want the United States of America. We are Arabs. 350 million of us. We contain the richest countries on the earth. We have all this land, all this seaboard, all this water, all this oil, all this gas. We have a mountain of cash so high, it's higher than Mount Everest if you piled it up. Why do we need you? Why do we need an idiot like Donald Trump?
Abraham Lincoln said, if you don't bend your back, no one will ride it.
Who said that? That's a very good one.
Abraham Lincoln. He said, if you don't bend your back, nobody will ride it.
You'll hear that again, but it will be attributed to me in the future. Fatima, last word to you.
Last word, no matter what's the issue of the Middle East, Arab, Muslim, or Palestine, or whatever, if we have the election in the U.S., if we don't have really a very good role in this as a community, as an Arab or as a Muslim, within the U.S. policy, there will not be any change. And I think that's where we want to work, particularly as George, you and me, we're not going to be effective in the election. So what should be done actually within the Muslim community in the state? They have to have a policy, and they have to be more effective within their society that can raise the issue of our issues in the Middle East. That's the most important thing,
Who are they leaning
actually.
Towards? Anyone got any idea?
You are not going to elect any of these candidates because you're not a citizen of the state.
No,
me too as
I'm
well.
asking who are American Muslims leaning towards? Anyone got any knowledge about that? You see, there was a series of great blunders when George W. Bush was elected, and I was touring, speaking in the United States at that time. Most of the Arab Americans, most of the Muslim Americans, were intending on voting for George W. Bush.
Yeah, so the question is to what extent that we have the influence within the U.S. policy as an Arab and Muslim.
Or Arab and, well, there are millions.
That's the point.
Millions of Muslim Americans.
So are we using this actually policy? Are we using this power?
No.
In favor of our policies?
I think they're terrified.
That's the point.
They're terrified because if you say anything and you're an Arab or a Muslim American, you're immediately on the FBI watch list, and you run the risk of 70 years in a federal penitentiary, like many pro-Palestinian activists in the United States have been in kind of internal Guantanamos in U.S. prisons. Look, we can't affect what happens in the United States, not we here in London. Al Mayadeen television will be reaching people in the United States, of course, but it will not be in any way decisive in the outcome. I always, at the risk of repeating myself, put it this way. Let the United States choose whichever president they want. That's their responsibility, it's their right. What is our responsibility and our right is to decide our relationship to the United States of America. As Abraham Lincoln said, if you don't bend your back, no one can ride it. And that is, at the end of the day, what the Americans used to call the $64,000 question, when $64,000 was a very, very great deal of money. It's the big question. It's the big enchilada. Are we forever going to allow a country thousands of miles away, which contains scores of millions of people who don't even know where we are on the map, have no conception of our history, our culture, and our political priorities, to decide how we live? and to decide how we relate to other people. That, my dears, is the question. Thank you very much for being here this evening.